You said the right thing, the right tone, the right words, and then you kept talking. Not a lie, not a mistake, just one sentence too many, a justification nobody asked for, an explanation that kept going, past the point, where it was actually helping to explain, into the territory where it was only filling the air, because the air felt like it needed filling. Baltasar Gracián, the Jesuit priest and court advisor we're spending this season with, had a name for this. He called it one of the most common and most quietly expensive mistakes a person can make. Not lying, not even talking too much. Something more specific than that. He called it the failure to notice when the useful part of a sentence has already ended. Tonight we're spending our time with one idea. The wisdom of silence is not the absence of speech. It is the recognition that most of what we say reduces the quality of what we mean. That sentence is worth sitting with, because it is not what people usually mean when they talk about the value of silence. This isn't a meditation episode. It isn't about quieting your mind or finding inner peace, though those things are real and worthwhile. This is about something much more practical and much more immediately useful. It's about the specific, repeatable habit of noticing the moment a sentence has finished doing its job and stopping there. Gracián lived in a world where words were currency. The Spanish court of the 17th century ran on alliances, reputations, and the careful management of who knew what about whom. In that world, he watched two kinds of people rise. The first kind talked constantly, filled every silence, explained every decision, offered opinions nobody had requested. The second kind said less, considerably less. And what Gracián noticed, watching both types for decades, is that the second kind was trusted more, feared more, and, this is the part that surprised him, listened to more carefully in the rare moments they did speak. He wrote about this directly. In one of his 300 aphorisms, he said, "Do not show your wound, for it will not sympathize, nor your good, for envy will not applaud." That's the discipline he's pointing at, the recognition that most of what we're tempted to reveal in either direction doesn't help us and often costs us. And in another aphorism, more directly still, more is expected from a man who says little than from one who talks a great deal. There's a simple mechanism behind this, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Attention is not evenly distributed. A person who speaks constantly trains the people around them to filter out most of what they say, the same way you stop hearing a fan running in the background of a room. The words are technically audible. They've simply stopped registering as information. Meanwhile, a person who speaks rarely trains the opposite response. Every word they do offer arrives without competition. It hasn't been buried under 40 other words said in the last 10 minutes. It lands with its full weight because there's nothing around it diluting it. This is not a trick. It's closer to a law of attention, the same way scarcity affects the value of anything else. Gracián understood it 400 years ago, before anyone knew a phrase like signal-to-noise ratio, but that's exactly what he was describing. So where does this actually cost you? Let me give you 3 places, and the first one is probably happening this week. The first place is in moments of pressure. negotiations, difficult conversations, the pause after someone asks you a hard question. Gracián observed that people under pressure have an almost physical need to fill silence, and that this need is almost never in their own interest. Think about the last time you asked for something, a raise, a favor, a change in a relationship, and the other person paused before answering. That pause probably made you uncomfortable, and if you're like most people, you likely tried to help them out of it. You added a qualifier. You lowered your ask before they'd even responded. You gave away information, or leverage, or both, purely because silence felt like something that needed rescuing. The person who can simply let a pause exist, who can ask the question and then stop fully without rushing to soften it, almost always ends up in a stronger position, not because they're being strategic or cold, because they've noticed something most people haven't. The silence isn't a problem, it's just silence. The urge to fix it is the only thing actually working against you. The second place this shows up is in how we defend our own decisions. This one is subtle, and it costs people more than they realize. Think about the last time you made a choice someone else questioned, skipped an event, said no to a project, changed direction on something. Notice how tempting it is to over-explain, to give 3 reasons instead of 1, to keep talking until you can see on the other person's face that they've accepted your reasoning. Gracián's observation here is almost the opposite of what feels intuitive. The more you explain an unforced decision, the more you signal that the decision itself wasn't fully settled, that some part of you is still negotiating with your own choice, or asking for permission you don't actually need. A simple, complete statement, offered once and then left alone, reads as certainty. The same statement repeated 3 different ways, with 3 different justifications stacked on top of each other, reads as doubt, even when the underlying decision hasn't changed at all. You don't owe most people a paragraph. You owe them a sentence, and the discipline is in trusting that the sentence is enough. The third place, and maybe the one Gracián cared about most, is what silence does for the words you eventually do choose to say. He believed, and this is really the center of tonight's episode, that a person's words are a limited resource, whether they treat them that way or not. Every unnecessary sentence spends down some of the weight your words carry, not permanently, but in the moment. The friend who comments on everything has less impact when they finally say something serious than the friend who rarely comments at all and then says exactly one thing that clearly mattered enough to interrupt their usual quiet. This isn't a reason to withhold warmth or to perform a kind of cold mysteriousness. That's a different thing entirely, and a shallower one. It's simply a reason to ask, more often than most of us do, whether the next sentence is actually necessary, or whether it's just the sound of discomfort with a quiet moment. So here's tonight's practice, and it's a small one, deliberately. At some point in the next 24 hours, you'll feel the pull to add one more sentence to something you've already said, an extra justification, an extra reassurance, an extra line explaining a choice nobody challenged. When you feel that pull, pause, just for a moment, and ask yourself one question. Is this sentence adding information, or is it just filling a silence I'm uncomfortable with? If it's the first, say it. If it's the second, let the silence stay exactly as it is. That's the whole practice. It won't feel like much the first time you try it, but do it consistently and something starts to shift. Not in how much you say, but in how much people listen when you finally do contribute your words. I'd genuinely like to know how this lands for you, so here's a question. If you want to leave it in the comments, where in your life do you talk the most to fill a silence that didn't actually need filling? A meeting, a text conversation, an argument you're trying to win? If you'd like more of these, new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, subscription is the best way to not miss one. And next Thursday, we're staying with Gracián for one of the deepest ideas in his entire philosophy, the difference between the person you actually are and the person you know yourself to be, and why closing that gap might be the most important work any of us do. Until then, good night, and let the silence do some of the talking for you.